Okay, so we're starting to record a session as well. Just give a little couple of seconds more for more people to come in, and then we start briefly. We have an intense session ahead, actually 2 sessions ahead. Our guest is already here, so I will kick off very shortly. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. I think good afternoon is the right word. We don't have anybody who we should say to good morning. You know me already, Maria Ida Palmieri. We're here together on a Monday, and we have here today Dr. Arndt Pechstein for our first session. I will introduce him shortly, and then he would take over the workshop for today. In the meantime, I see some people in the chat commenting. Hello, everyone. I see also a representation from Uganda again, a lot of people from Uganda today. Nice. So this is the 3rd workshop of our project, where we really focus on understanding how social business and future skills can play a role in fighting climate change, and in particular in bringing solutions that can also support the communities which are most affected by climate change. For the people who are new today, maybe I just make a little bit of a recap of this project and the approach that we had in this project. These are it's a series of 3 projects actually, which are targeting different regions around the world. And the way we approach this project usually is by engaging with the communities, local communities and organizations, in order to reach as much people as possible. So these workshops also afterwards will be shared with a lot of communities as well. We have a series of workshops where we try to really bring forward some specific skills or some specific methodologies that we apply in social business. And the focus of these programs in particular, as I said, is on entrepreneurship mindset from a social business perspective, and on future skills applied. And then we select out of the people that engage with us in the program 20 entrepreneurs that are being mentored. And I see a lot of you here today. There were a lot already of you on Monday, mentored on how to accelerate their own ventures. So this, when it comes to the workshops, sorry, my connection is a bit slow. Here we are. So here you see the experts that we have engaged for the workshop series that we prepare for the climate change challengers. So you met Dr. Enayati on Monday, and today you will meet our new experts. So Dr. Arndt Pechstein, co-founder of Future Skills and of the Future Company, and Professor Dr. Annabel Tersnes von Attenburg, the CEO of Sustain Plus GmbH. So I will pass the ball in a minute to Dr. Arndt Pechstein and do a little bit of an intro. And this is where we are today. So today we're going to indeed focus on future skills applied to social business. And in particular, we're going to see an interesting inspiration from biomimicry. I'm particularly interested as well in hearing more about it, because I've been reading in the past weeks about it. And then we will have with Dr. Annabel Tersnes a focus really on future skills, a bit more generic, in order to, and how can these help entrepreneurs transform their organizations. Yes. So here we are today, and we start immediately after the last session, where we saw in particular the role of social business in creating an impact in areas affected by climate change. We saw how we use system thinking in social business to really understand problems that are very complex. And we saw the Two Wings Foundation and how they're working in climate affected areas. Before maybe I saw already a little bit of check-in of people writing in the chat. So I just go forward to introduce then the key topics of today, but that they will be then introduced better by our guest, Dr. Arndt Pechstein. So you, as I was saying, you're the CEO of the Future Company. You have a very strong focus on future skills, and as a chairman of the Biomimicry Academy, you have a strong focus also on biomimicry. But you're also an expert in various design thinking, agile transformation, digitalization. So you have been supporting a lot of SMEs and corporates on agile transformation to create sustainable solutions. So it's a great honor to have you with us today. And the floor is yours. We can't wait to hear more about what you have today. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Welcome.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. So it's a great pleasure to be here and to see that people are eager to learn more about biomimicry and future skills, and especially about changing the world. That's what I'm after, and that, I guess that connects us all. So yeah, I prepared some slides which I would like to share with you now. And this is all about biomimicry and future skills. By the way, do you see everything, or is it interrupted by some blacked out boxes? Because sometimes the Zoom thing, does it cover anything? No, you can read skills completely.
We can see the full screen actually.
Perfect, yeah. Great. All right, so I just collapsed this navigation bar. That's a bit annoying here. All right, so biomimicry and future skills, innovation inspired by nature, learning for a better tomorrow. Just a few words about my background, because that informs also the perspective I take on the world. I studied biochemistry. I did my PhD in neuroscience, studying our brain, learning, and memory. But then I decided not to stay in science and not to accumulate more knowledge, but to rather apply it and to work with people instead of invisible liquids. And then I stumbled upon a field because of my passion for living systems. First, I stumbled upon biomimicry, and that's something I will deep dive a bit more today, like learning from living systems, learning from complex adaptive systems. And that rather quickly led me first to design thinking, how to look at people's needs to make a change, but later also to organizational change. So this is what I mostly do in my work, working with organizations to from ministries and administration to private organizations to really make a change and take people along. And one topic that is connecting these things and becomes more relevant in a world that becomes increasingly digitalized is then the question, what makes us relevant in a world that is increasingly influenced by algorithms? So future skills and connected with it, how can we do exponential change for the good is something that drives me. Now, technology, like new technology is common, but new thinking is rare. That's what Sir Peter Blake once said. And what it means is we are often talking about technology and think technology will save us. It can help us, but it's neutral. So we decide what we do with it. And the thinking behind, the values behind, the purpose and its application is way more important than the technology as such. And that is important to understand because we live in a world that is exponentially accelerated because of that very technology, especially, and globalization and networks and so on. And this is a world that has a runaway dynamic. We can't wrap our heads around this exponentiality. We just think and mostly act also linearly. So we make predictions and anticipate the future based on our present and past. But these predictions are less and less accurate in a world that is accelerating, increasingly different from what we think it would be. And that's a challenge. That's a dilemma that we need to solve. This world is often described as VUCA, going as an acronym for these four terms: volatility, which means a super rapid dynamic in changes, both in frequency and amplitude. So we cannot plan what happens in a year, not even in half a year. We don't know how the next 10 years will look like. So we have to accept that there's a lot of volatility and change. That means there's a lot of uncertainty because we cannot plan. We are in foggy environments, so we have to learn to deal with uncertainty. And it makes us uncertain, about whether or not we can handle it, what is the right thing to do, what will be the consequences of our actions. That's increasingly harder to tell and to predict. At the same time, complexity is rising because of technology, of data and information, and the interactions and dependencies between them. And because there's so much information out there in such a dynamic, there's a high ambiguity, which means we don't live any longer in an either or world, but in a both, things are equally maybe relevant. So there are dilemmas and paradoxons that we need to deal with. And it's not yes or no, but sometimes it's yes and no. And that's something we need to embrace and develop a tolerance for. Now, this is very often connotated negatively. But it's, as always, and as Viktor Frankl already said, it's always a matter of perspective. So the world just is, and it is what we think it to be. And the greatest danger in times of turbulence, as Peter Drucker, one of the great management thought leaders of the last century, said, is in times of turbulence, not the turbulence as such, but it is to act with the logic of yesterday. So if we use tools and processes and mindsets of the past that don't fit any longer, we will fail. So it's the way we approach things, not the things per se that maybe or maybe not disturbing. And that's why I say that a little bit provocatively, tradition is not a business model. So we need to challenge the status quo. We need to reflect honestly and boldly, courageously, actually, and think what are the things that we need to leave behind, that we need to let go because they are not appropriate anymore, or maybe because they have never been appropriate, actually, because there are also quite some things that have actually never worked. We just thought or wanted them to work, or they have just worked for a minority of people. Now, oftentimes this VUCA world is connotated negatively. Now, I want to reframe this because this is the starting point and the reason, the narrative why we should also look into nature. And then I explain biomimicry a little bit deeper. So to look at the world in a more positive way and in a way that we can actually embrace that as an opportunity, I suggest here, and I call that hybrid thinking, because we need to break boundaries and break silos and basically blur the boundaries between different things, between disciplines and between different sectors and between departments and everything. Like it's just all interconnected. So there is no strict boundaries. And what I offer here is basically a reinterpretation, a reframe of the VUCA world. And these are 4 strategies how to deal with this world. And I give every letter a second meaning. With V meaning we need a vision, like we need new narratives, new positive visions or narratives that motivate us, that unite us, that make us curious and courageous, and that allow us to focus. So the purpose, we need a purpose, and we need to think bold, like really bold, like have large visions of a future, how we want it to be, because we all know how we don't want it to be, but that is currently dominating all our media, and this creates a state of fear, and that's not helping. So by being aware, obviously, what is happening in the world, so not to just pretend everything is good, which is not, but at the same time, not losing courage and like being in this constant state of fear, rather thinking optimistically and creating positive visions of desired future states, the world we want to live in and the world we want to have, and then derive strategies how to get there, because that brings us together, that unites us, and that allows things to be possible, like the moon landing, that are deemed impossible as to now. The second thing is how to deal with uncertainty. Well, that's about people. We need to make people actors of change again. They can't longer feel like objects of change, but they need to be agents of change. So to empower them, to upskill them, to basically use this potential and this diversity, and to give them self-efficacy in believing and trusting that they can make a difference and that they want to and can contribute to a better future. And that has a lot to do with education and with teaching and with role modeling. And it starts in the early childhood with our primary caregivers, but it continues in school and throughout the whole educational system. So it's not any longer only about acquiring knowledge and learning to read and write, which we still need. I mean, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't do this. We do need that more than ever, alone already, to be able to assess all the information we get on TikTok and all these media, and not fall prey to all this propaganda from like very like harmful like people. But on top of this, and almost more importantly, and at least with the same significance, we also need to learn to adapt and to develop this joy of learning and be able to unlearn and let go of things that are not useful any longer and relearn new things. So this lifelong learning is something that we're made for, that our brains are made for, and that we should embrace. And that is exactly the skill gap we're facing. We're facing a massive gap, and there's a lot of studies, scientific studies and business studies showing this gap, that the skills we actually need in an exponential world and the skills we actually have and up to today even acquire in school is something that is widening just as much as I showed before. And we need to work on that, because this is the largest lever for like future readiness of our societies. And that leads us to the next thing, because that is one of the paradigms in school already. If you look at this and teaching, it's about collaboration. Complexity can only be dealt with collaboration. And in school, we train and condition people already from the very early beginning to compare themselves to others and to compete, basically, in terms of getting grades or being better than someone or feeling inferior because someone else is better. And this creates a feeling of external like motivation or comparison, which is never good. So instead of comparing ourselves to others, we should rather compare ourselves to our past self and then develop all on our own trajectory and then learn from and with each other. So this is collaboration, and then co-create a better world. And this is something we see in biology even, like the best possible way of interacting is the symbiosis for the mutual benefit of two individuals or systems, or it could be more, but just for sake of simplicity, I chose two here. There's mutualism, where at least one has a benefit. Then there is something where one has a benefit and another partner has a disadvantage. That's what we call parasitism. And then there's something where both have a negative, like a disadvantage, negative effect, and that is called competition. And that is to say that like biologists realize that more and more species actually cooperate or collaborate than we thought previously. Of course, there's still competition, and healthy competition is also something that can spur innovation and creativity. But at the same time, if it's too harsh and if it's the only paradigm, the dominating paradigm, we lose out. It's very costly. And even living systems try to avoid competition when it's possible. So that's a very interesting thing already. So if we're in this world of hybrid thinking, of collaboration, then we are learning societies, learning organizations, learning networks, and then we can approach this exponential world. We can't do this with this kind of better, higher, faster than someone else culture where everyone tries to go alone. This is impossible. This is just systemically not possible. And that leads me to the fourth point, which is how do we deal with ambiguity? And that is about agility and adaptiveness. And for this, we require systems thinking. We need to take responsibility, and we should aim for impact, which is then connecting back, and that makes it full circle to the vision, because the vision should be driven by values and by basically generating impact for the larger good. And here we need to learn that letting go is sometimes the best way to improve. We can't continue just to make things more efficient and fix things that maybe have never worked or that have maybe once worked but don't work any longer. So we are rather, we should be courageous enough to let go and build the new thing, not complain so much about the things that don't work. As Buckminster Fuller once said, you never change the system by fighting the existing reality. You only change it by creating something new that makes the old obsolete. So that is what we need to do. Put our energy in the positive things, put the energy in all those things that we want and not fighting the ones that we don't want. So instead of fighting war, we should look in creating freedom instead of fighting anti-democratic people, looking into what does it need to be more democratic? How do we create dialogues between people again who don't talk to each other and so on? So we need whole different approaches, and embracing other people. Empathy is one of the primary skills that we need again in order to be able to have conversations and to create a common future and not two different or like three different polar futures. So and this is basically what we need. We need positive narratives, visions about the future. We need to empower people and upskill them to be actors of change. We need to collaborate and co-create, and we need to be agile and adaptive in order to embrace this uncertainty and ambiguity and deal with the unknown. Now, for this to happen, the question is now, this seems obvious. I guess I don't see you now, but I guess you all agree and all not. And whenever I give these keynotes, people say, yeah, this sounds fair enough, and we should do that. Question is always, why don't we do this? And the reason is because we are disconnected from two things. We're disconnected from ourselves and we're disconnected from nature. And that's the main challenge. We need to reconnect to ourselves and we need to reconnect to nature. And I will look at these two things now to explain what I mean by this, because there rests a huge potential in doing both. Let's start with reconnecting to nature. So just ahead of this, I want to share some resources because if you haven't seen them, they are almost must-sees. I would say every school should watch these things. There's like the movie or the series One Strange Rock that was once streamed on Netflix, I'm not sure if like it's not on Netflix any longer, but certainly it's out there. It was done by National Geographic. It's moderated by Will Smith, very entertaining, and it's about the history of our planet and life and how it's all interconnected. Super entertaining, exciting, deeply scientific, at the same time very understandable, comprehensive. It's super fundamental and should belong in any school. Breaking Boundaries, another series or documentary with Johan Rockström, who is was at the Stockholm Resilience Center. He's now the head of the Climate Research Center here in Potsdam, and he has, together with others, developed the concept of the planetary boundaries that most of them we have overstepped, and they talk about this and how we can fix that, and that we need to fix it. Beyond Zero, a documentary about interface, an industry or like a company in a very dirty industry that became not only carbon neutral, but is by now already carbon positive. So they add actually value to the climate and not just are not harmful, but they are beneficial. And then, of course, and this is where it all starts and where we started seriously talking about the limits of growth, is exactly that publication from the Club of Rome in 1972. And it's like every 10-year renewal until 2 years ago when Earth for All was the 50-year basically anniversary of that thing. And what are the options that we have left? And which is, to spoil it a bit, the giant leap. Either we change big time or too little too late, which means that there will be quite some consequences of these planetary changes and all the social changes connected with it. And then there's a very good satire, Don't Look Up, if you haven't seen that movie. That's an amazing one. There's a lot of stars featuring in that movie, and it's really amazing satire on that entire thing of climate change. Now, why do we look and why should we learn from nature? Well, one answer is because it's around for 3.8 billion years on this planet. So far as we know, our planet is the only planet that has at least this complex life as we know it. Maybe if you have read the latest book from James Lovelock, the creator of the Gaia theory, he even argues that chances are very likely that we are the only planet that has intelligent life, and he gives very good arguments for that. So for that reason already, and because we are a young species, we are merely 300,000 years old, so there's a lot of things we can learn from this age of our planet and from all the ancestors and species around us. Now, this is an astronomical number we can't wrap our heads around. So to make it a little bit more tangible, what I did is I compressed this and even a bit more because there was no life on planet Earth from the beginning. So it developed a bit later. So our planet is even older. It's 4.5 billion years. And I compressed that into something that we can comprehend into one calendar year. So from January till December, 12 months. This is something we feel, we know how long that feels, and then we can put things into perspective. So imagine we compress 4.5 billion years into 12 months. Then we had basically the 1st of January, where we had the start of existence, the formation of planet Earth. And then it would have taken until end of February that we even had the first life on our planet. And it was not before the first, in September, basically autumn, that we had the first sex and sexual reproduction, which led to an explosion of species and biodiversity. And then it was not before early December that life evolved from water to land. And then around Christmas time was when the dinosaurs went extinct. And if you remember back from your school, you know how long that is ago, like millions of years. And now you may wonder, where are we? And Homo sapiens is less than half an hour old on this scale. And what we think is the pinnacle of evolution, the industrial revolution, that's less than 2 seconds. And this is where we take all our pride and think this fixes all. And this obviously doesn't fix all. So that's why we need to, or we should embrace the opportunity and the potential laying within biological systems. And especially in a world that is not predictable and linear and mechanic, and has never been, by the way, it just seemed that way, or we tried to build it this way, but that is complex and changing and interconnected and living. And therefore, we need different approaches, and biology serves us just for that, but not only as a servant in terms of exploiting nature intellectually, but also, and I come to this in a second, but also giving back and sustaining and regenerating and having this regenerative mindset to not just be less bad, but to really be an integral part of nature that we are, and that we're all interconnected with, and to basically live in balance with these living systems. And that's exactly what biomimicry is about. So this word comes from the old Greek, which means bios for life, and mimesis means imitate. And that's what it really is. It's about imitating living systems, not as in making things that look like nature. It has nothing to do with biomimicry, but understanding what the functional principles and strategies are behind a surface or a mechanism or a strategy, and then abstracting these and applying these to human problem solving. And that, to say, has like biomimicry has three different like hallmarks, and they are important, and they discriminate it also from bionics and other fields of bioinspiration, because biomimicry has this inherent ethos. It's not just about getting this this new cutting edge advantage to outsmart your competitor because you took biology as a role model and then do business as usual, just faster and inspired by nature. But it has this ethos of basically understanding that nature is something we want to preserve and we are part of. So it basically appreciates that notion that we want to live on a healthy planet and we want to give back and not just take. The second part is then to reconnect. It's not just about reading papers and studying and measuring, but it's also being part of nature. And we are an integral part of that, and we should be connected and immerse into nature. And that also involves that we seek nature and living systems and are in connection, and not just in gray infrastructure and rectangular boxes, and then wonder why we're completely disconnected and why mental health and chronic disorders are at rocketing level of increase. And lastly, and this is the third point, that's the more technical part, is then to understand what are the mechanisms behind it and emulate them. So to imitate them in some way and come up with new innovations that are better, that are more sustainable, that are circular, and that are more beneficial for more people and not just for a large privileged minority. So this is really about a mindset shift from seeing nature as a warehouse of goods where we think that's all ours and we own it and we can do whatever we want, what we currently do with this waste, take, make, and waste culture, to this kind of mindset. Yes, we can use it, but respectfully and responsibly, and treat it like a library. And in a library, you are very careful with the books and you bring them back. And that is how we should treat nature as well. So we can learn from this wisdom. We can learn from the beauty, take inspiration, use things and give them back and sustain it on a long run. And that is what biomimicry is about. And how we do this? Well, natural and technological design, they don't overlap really, or not obviously. So the overlap here, the intersection, is the functional level. So you need to ask the question, what is the design going to do? What's the intention? What is the outcome? What is the job to be done? And then you get answers from biology. So you can't ask, how do you build a better car? Because maybe even today the car is not the right solution for a city in the 21st century, but you can ask, how do we do mobility better? And then you come up with totally different solutions and new ways of providing mobility and building cities. And that are the kind of answers we need. So, and therefore we need to ask different questions. So it starts with asking the right questions and daring to ask maybe uncomfortable questions to get new answers. So let me give you a few examples for different levels of biomimicry. You can imitate or emulate a form or a material or something like that. Then you can imitate a process, could be an assembly process or a chemical process or something like that. And you can emulate an entire system. And I give you one example for each of them. Let's start with the form. What you see here is a slime mold. Maybe you've seen that when you go through forests, you see them in different colors, orange and yellow and whitish. And look very spectacular. Well, they basically decompose the wood to make new nutrients for the forest. But the interesting thing is how they actually move. So this is a time-lapse movie of them spreading. The white dots are nutrients. And you see that they first spread randomly and then they reinforce the tracks between the foot points. And that is it's actually single cells that combined to a so-called superorganism. So single cells that combine to a multicellular superorganism. Maybe you know the term superorganism, like an anthill or a beehive is also a superorganism. You have individual organisms, but they form an intelligent superorganism in a way. And the slime mold does the same thing on a cellular level. And you see that the highways between these food points, they are super efficient. And they mimic, that's very funny. If we as humans would build lines and networks with intelligence and with engineering capability between lines, and this has been done with plotting these dots like Tokyo-Yokohama railway system or like flight nodes in US. And this mushroom, this little fungus, basically mimics, not knowing anything and not having intelligence, basically builds very similar patterns. So it basically, algorithmically and by stochastic, optimizes in a self-organized way the best way. And this has been used by Airbus, for instance. Airbus and any, like if you have aviation and if you have airplanes, you want to make it light because every kilogram matters when you want to save fuel. There's some of these structural elements which are like, for instance, this partition where the steward or stewardess are sitting, these kind of compartment separators. They have a certain weight and they need to be there. They're not just there to separate something. They have a structural load-bearing role. So they are critical to the stability of the plane. So you cannot just make them light to save weight. So what they did is then they used this mushroom algorithm, from this slime mold, and developed an algorithm which optimizes material distribution. So when you have a structure and you have load on different parts of structure, you want to develop it such that you put material exactly there where it's needed and remove it where it's not needed. And this is a very complex, it's like there's almost infinitesimal, uncountable numbers of possibilities. And this algorithm can do this and optimize this generatively. And Airbus, together with Autodesk, have done this. And they came up with a partition, and this so-called bionic partition, which instead of 65 kilogram weighs 35 kilograms. So it's a 45% reduction. So it's almost half of the weight. And this is massive. I mean, we're talking about not just 1-2% of savings or improvement. This is about huge changes and innovations. And this is the potential that lies within biology, because biology does it totally differently. It's not about making something with a different material only, but it's about structure very often. And that is the huge difference that we can learn from biology. Now, about a process, let's look into a process. When we build, and we build more cities than ever, and the need for building materials is massively increasing, the cement is most of the problem. Actually, the build industry with basically production of the materials, with actually building the buildings, maintaining the buildings, uses I think more than a third, or is responsible for more than a third of the carbon dioxide emissions. It's massive. And this is partially because cement production is very energy intense. For 1 ton of cement, you produce about 1 ton of carbon dioxide. Now, you could say, if you were like thinking in the traditional green way, say, oh, it would be nice if we reduced this to half a ton, then we would have half the emissions. That's nice thinking, but I think that's by far not bold enough. It's not sufficient to just think that way. And we can't celebrate if we reduce our harm to half. We have to think differently. And even thinking zero is not enough. So thinking, okay, what if we didn't produce any carbon? Even that can be sometimes too little bold. So instead, we should maybe think, what if we fixed carbon by making cement? And that's, I know now, not knowing the answer, which I will present in a second, that sounds absurd because that's turning it upside down. But in fact, that's exactly what nature is doing. It's a process that is called biomineralization. That's what corals do, coral reefs. Some of you maybe have seen them, or divers, or obviously we all have heard of them. So corals that are, by the way, bleaching and destroyed by acidification and warming our oceans. So again, that's a systems effect. So they are massive carbon sinks, because what they do is in their process, they bind atmospheric carbon and make material out of it. And this material is calcium carbonate that's chemically identical with cement. And they don't do this by releasing carbon dioxide, but by fixing it. So this is the way we should think. And this is the potential that we see in living systems. And there's companies that can do this. So they have a hard time because they're fighting a lobby that is driven by profit and by like lobbyists. And it's very difficult to change the system. And yet we should never give up and see the potential and celebrate that this is possible and that we can learn from such things. And finally, the system, there's nice examples and what we can mimic. One example here is maybe you've heard of the mycorrhiza, which is basically, it's also called the wood wide web. This is a symbiosis between the mushrooms in the forest and the root systems of the trees that form a symbiosis. The tree gives nutrients like glucose and sugar to the mushroom. The mushroom provides huge amounts of water. And there's a lot of this network under the forest floor or in the forest floor. Actually, it's almost more exciting in the forest floor than on top. Although we should also celebrate photosynthesis, obviously, but there's equally exciting stuff happening under the floor. And not only this, they also send signals. So they use kind of hormones. It's not called hormones in plants, but it's similar substance, like almost homeopathic amounts of substances, sending them as signal molecules throughout the forest. If there's like a beetle coming, attacking a tree, it can send a signal and tell the other trees further distant, oh, better produce this bitter substance or this toxin to prevent you from being attacked by this swarm or beetle or whatever it is. So that's a very interesting thing. And they even support each other. So the large trees give food to the small trees because they don't get so much light yet. So they have a whole system that makes it resilient because they support each other. And that was mimicked conceptually, metaphorically, for instance, in Denmark, in Kalundborg. Kalundborg is an industrial park, and it's not built like we build multi-industrial parks where we just build our one company next to the other without caring what the other company does. No, that one is built as a network. So they set together and planned together all these companies and thought, okay, what is the inflow? What is the outflow? What is the waste we produce? How could the waste of one company be the inflow of the other one? So to reduce as a system the waste and the stuff and the emissions we produce, and reduce the transport needed to maybe bring in the very same thing that the other one considers waste. Because technically speaking, in nature, there is no such thing like waste. There is no waste in nature. Waste is a human concept, and it's an outdated concept, and there are solutions to that. So thinking in a circular way is something that can help us be like future ready and be much more sustainable and planetary. So this is just, as you see, they are all basically orchestrating the in and outflows to operate as a system and support each other instead of being just coexisting next to each other. Now, how can you do this? This is about biomimicry. You don't have to be a scientist or a biologist to apply that. There's a very cool platform, a database that our partners in the US curate and fill constantly. It's called asknature.org. And this is like a Google for natural solutions. You can enter, how does nature produce color? How does nature insulate? How does nature do mobility? How does nature provide glue or whatever it is? So the functional question, and then you get answers. You get scientific studies, you get case studies like some of which I presented that if they exist. So it's a very inspirational database and you can always dig deeper. So that's a low barrier entry to this field, which allows everyone to use it. Now, Steve Jobs once said he thinks the biggest innovation in the 21st century will be the one at the intersection of biology and technology, and he talked about a new era. And I think this is definitely true. And I've worked many years in the field of biomimicry, and I'm connected to the community, and we're in constant exchange. And yet it's a slowly developing field. I mean, how many of you have known biomimicry before? How many of you have worked with biomimicry? Even fewer. So there's the need to use this more. But why is it not working? And that is for the second reason, because we are disconnected from ourselves. And that brings me to the second topic, to the question, how do we upskill ourselves? How do we reconnect to ourselves? Why do we need this? We don't only need this to protect our planet. We need this first and foremost to protect ourselves from what we are currently doing. And this is just because, and going back to what I said earlier, the VUCA world, we have no clue what will happen in the future. We don't know which jobs will exist. We have no clue which technologies there will be. We have no clue which problems we'll face, let alone how the solutions look like. What we need is therefore the competencies and capacities and skills to equip us with dealing with that whenever it comes. And hopefully by being value-driven and having certain criteria of things that we want and things that we don't want, that we navigate in the right direction, but still we are responsive and hopefully proactive in some way to deal with these uncertainties. Yet, and this is something that I introduced earlier, we have this massive skill gap. And this is something that is really one of my core passions, like how to reconnect to nature and how to reconnect to ourselves and how do we make people to reconnect to each other and to nature. And together with Martin, we run the Future company, and we have taken up, after we have started that with Peter Spiegel, who's also here in the call and like leading this with his team, this entire network. We have asked the question, what are these future skills? What are the skills that we require in the 21st century? How are they leading us into a desired future? And how can we make people learn them easily? And after having published the Future Skills book 3 years ago by now, we came up with the second book, which is the Future Skills Navigator, to make it more tangible, to basically define more precisely what makes us human, what are the skills that we need, and how can we learn them. So I want to quickly take you on that journey for the last 10 minutes or so. That we then have a discussion, because we live in a digital and accelerated world, and everything that can be automated will be automated. But that also means that everything that cannot be automated will become extremely valuable. And these are our human skills. These are the skills that make us human, and they are not taught in school. They have until recently not really been appreciated at any workplace because you cannot measure them. You cannot put numbers on it, and people like putting numbers and measure things. So that's why we thought, okay, how can we make it more tangible? How can we make it more attractive and more accessible to learn about, embrace, and study these future skills and empower people to be change makers of a better tomorrow? And that's what the Future Skills Navigator is about. So we said, okay, we need a more holistic model of what it means to be human. And yes, we are rational beings. We can think, we can analyze, we can understand, we have logic, but that's not everything. And just having an intelligence quotient is not enough. It's far too short, in terms of what human capability is. Because we are also emotional, we can feel, we can sense, we can basically be in touch with us, with our feelings, with other people's feelings, like empathy and so on. But again, this is not everything. We're more than this. We are also spiritual. And spiritual, not meaning in a religious way, but spiritual as in connection, being connected to something, being connected to myself, first of all, like knowing, like being mindful, being kind to myself, being aware of me and as part of the world, and being connected to my needs, to my boundaries, to my emotions, and so on. Being connected to others, if I want to be a leader, I need to be connected to others. I can't lead others if I'm totally disconnected from them, if I don't understand and feel what they need and what inspires them and how I can contribute to them being intrinsically motivated. And also being connected to a larger purpose, something that's bigger than me and bigger than anyone, like a big vision. That's also about spirituality, being connected to a vision, to a purpose. And lastly, also being connected to living systems, like human nature connection. That's a deeply spiritual connection that we have largely lost in Western societies. And we are not only rational, we're not only emotional, we're not only spiritual and now reflecting a lot, but we are also doing things. So we are transformational beings. We can change things. We can have impact. We can move things from one state to another, and we can have impact. So if you look at this, we can look at these things from 4 different levels. We can do this on the I level, like on me, intrapersonal development, as like changing and transforming myself, or feeling myself, or understanding myself, or being connected to myself. And equally, then I can do this on the you level. So one-on-one, I can empathize with someone. That's an emotional skill on a one-on-one level, for instance. Then we have we, which is basically collectives, can be a family, can be like a team, it can be an organization, it can be a society. So anything which is a composite of different people. And then we have, for the lack of a better pronoun, we called it all, because it should be more than just human-centered. It should be planet-centered and life-centered. And that's why we said we need another 4th layer, because it's not just humans. And that contains systems thinking, understanding how everything is connected. That is, for instance, on the rational level. On the spiritual level, it's human nature connection, relationship. How do we reconnect to nature? On the emotional level, it's, for instance, global citizenship, to embrace that we are all one, basically, and that we are interconnected. And transformability in the transforming and impact generating section. And if you combine these 4x4 concept, then we come up with 16 future skill classes. And when you see them, you will see that these 16 cannot be automated. You cannot automate and run algorithms on leadership or on relationship building or on long-term orientation and vision or on responsibility and stewardship. That's nothing that can be automated. The question, how does a desirable future look like, is no question ChatGPT can answer, but that we have to answer. And that's a good thing that only we can answer this. So these are the skills that cannot be automated, and they belong into schools. They belong to every workplace. They belong in leadership and in teams and in governments and everywhere, because if we would embrace this, then the world would be a whole different place. Now, it doesn't end there. I don't go into detail. We put behind every of these 16 future skills classes, we put 4 skills, actual skills that you can learn. And this looks super complex, and this is just to shock you. We then thought, okay, how can we now make them in a way more tangible? And then we designed by now 2 different algorithms, 2 assessments, one on a personal level and one for teams and organizations, that allows us to get an entry point into these future skills to an assessment. You get basically a report by which you see where are your strengths, where are your development potentials, and where do they overlap with others, and what are the things you want to develop in order to design individual learning paths. And these are the things that we also then created, different learning paths for different topics. So far, we have created 7 learning journeys that are blended learning. So it's individual, self-paced, and group learning. It is digital and physical. And it has like videos and games and exercise and so on. So it's an integral. It's also based on modern learning theories that basically we enable people quickly to enter these topics, to stick to the topic and to learn it and apply it and exchange with others. So it's intentionally made such that you don't just sit in front of a video and watch it, but that you engage in groups and learn with others, to also have experiential learning and learning on the job. So this is what we do, Future Skills for a Better Future. It's holistic. It has basically all aspects of human beings. It's measurable and it's learnable, because that's what we need in order to connect people back to themselves and to each other. Because only, and that is to sum up, if we reconnect to ourselves and if we reconnect to nature, will we be able to create a better future. I hope I could inspire you. We can't go back and change the beginning. That's what C.S. Lewis said, but we can always start where we are and change the ending. And that is hopefully the inspiration I could share with you, and that brings you some joy and optimism and some courage and boldness to make a change in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arndt. Like I was also like taking so many notes. It's like it was impressive, and I was also reading some comments from other people. So I guess we have some time for questions. Then people were already writing in the chat for you some questions.
Which I didn't follow, by the way. So maybe if you followed it, maybe you can summarize or pick some.
Exactly. I was going to do it. Exactly. So we have some more practical questions, and also like anyone, feel free to raise your hand and also ask directly your questions. So we have a more like philosophical, if we want. So at the very beginning of the presentation, if ambiguity and chaos is on the way, what is best possible solution and process to aim for growth, which is not linear and matches the changing around the society amidst the chaos? That's a very higher level question. And then we have some. Shall I just read them for you, or you prefer to answer each question?
Let me go into that one. I first need to understand.
Exactly.
It's very well. First, I'm not sure I understand the meaning of growth in the sentence properly, because the thing is, we should not aim for growth just under any condition. Growth, is a strange concept that we made to a strange concept, because we connect growth with quantitative growth always. And that's not possible in an unlimited way, as we all know, because we live on a limited planet. Growth in nature is growing in different directions. Growth can be quantitative, could be qualitative. Our brain doesn't grow in quantity and size our life, but it grows in complexity throughout the entire life. So complexity is another dimension of growth that we totally underestimate so far. Plus, nature doesn't always grow. So depending on what you see as a growth, like our planet is evolving, and that in a sense is growth over time. So we are evolving towards more intelligent species, for instance, towards more complexity and biodiversity, if you watch the trajectory of planetary evolution. So that in itself is also growth, but it's always based on the resources that are available and not exceeding these resources. So that is a new concept of growth. And it's not always exponential in nature either. There's exponential growth. If exponential growth continues unhindered, it collapses. Every virus knows this. They grow exponentially, and eventually the host is dead, and then it's bad. So and then it needs to spread to the next host until the entire population maybe of a species is dead, and then it's bad for the virus too. So like again, like this entire concept of growth, be it exponential or steady, but still always positive, is not a good thing, and it's not even possible. So we need to revamp this. And chaos, I mean, yeah, there's chaos, if you wish. Like the world is driven by by entropy and chaos, and that's the nature of the universe. We like to make order, and life in itself is a mechanism to sustain order. Because as soon as we stop living, if we die, chaos takes over, like entropy takes over. So we need energy to sustain order, and as soon as we can provide this energy, for instance, if an organism dies, then entropy takes over and it disintegrates again, which is part again of a larger system anyways. So yeah, chaos is an inherent part of living systems and of the universe, even non-living systems. And life is a way of sustaining order in chaos. And if we learn from life, then we can learn how to deal with chaos. Maybe that helps a bit on this philosophical
I think you definitely answered the question. And that was Sabir. Thank you so much. So I see some, so there is also another question here from Ewi. I saw Tambaza you raised your hand before, so just let me go through the question of Ewi. Ewi, if you want to talk directly, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question directly. Otherwise, I'm going to read it for you.
Thank you so much for this brilliant. I was really excited going through your presentation with you, and I feel like the you made on Denmark was very inspiring and impressive, and I wanted to know how realistic this could be replicated in some part of the world, Africa, especially my country. How can we be able to replicate such brilliant ideas around our country, and to be able to create that symbiotic relationship that is actually real? It might not be marketing, but what the possibility of making it happen in our context, looking into the future and the ideas we're developing on a day-to-day basis.
It was hard to understand, but like I think we all see the, and I get the gist of it, and I think we all see your question or your comment in the chat. It's about, I just tried to summarize. So you found the Denmark example with the industrial symbiosis inspiring, but you wonder how this could be realized in Africa, you said. How realistic is it in your regions to make it such a way? Well, I know too little, honestly, about the circumstances exactly for the industry in your country, so I cannot specifically comment on that question. But generally saying, are two things. First of all, to make that work, it always requires people to talk to each other and to collaborate, so to be open to this. So the question then would be, and maybe give you more questions than answers, is it possible to have people, industries, different companies talk to each other to share that joint vision? Okay, we want this. So the intention is important. Everything starts with an intention. And if there's a common intention, you will find ways. And it may not work immediately, and you may not solve all problems, but at least you go in the right direction. The second question is, does it always have to be as big as this industrial park, like in Denmark, or can it be a local network? I mean, there are examples. You have this cardboard to what is it called? There's this project that was done, I think, by the Blue Economy from Gunther Pauli, this cardboard to coffee system, where you have basically cardboard from packaging that is used for sheep like horse bedding, and then basically the like stuff that the like the poo from the animals is then used to fertilize ground, and it's used to grow mushroom or something. And then there's a circular thing with coffee ground that is used again as a fertilizer for mushrooms. So it can be really small. So basically, there's always an opportunity. Whenever you have waste somewhere, that's an opportunity. So if we see waste not as something that is bad as we treat it, but not as something per se bad, but something that has a potential to be used for something else. And then you can think, okay, we have coffee ground. We in our restaurant don't need coffee ground, but who else could use coffee ground? So maybe there's a farmer, and then maybe you build micro businesses that can sustain themselves. So it's not only good for basically circulating resources and being more sustainable, it's also good for the small economy and for the social system. So thinking in these networks and thinking in interdependencies and how one thing can contribute to the other, that is how we should think. So that in that way, you can start really small and think of opportunities and get people together to create circular systems. Maybe that is an answer that helps and resonates.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much. I was also thinking about another example that we have like a lot of entrepreneurs in the cohort, for example, that are working with natural briquettes. So in order to prevent deforestation for firewood, there's a big request for click fuel, and then there's a lot of waste in farms. So what they do is they connect the farms to create the briquettes, then they distribute them in villages, and they also train people in the villages to use their own waste. To create their own fuel as well. So that's, for example, could be another example to answer to your question, Ewi. Tambaz, I think you had your hand raised before. You had a question. I don't see Tambaz anymore. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. My question, the presenter have speak what I wanted to ask. The presentation is full of high technology, and here in Africa we are facing a serious problem related to technology. So I wanted to ask how this presentation can be affordable in Africa. But the two examples you bring on try to give me the open mind, because if we want, for us entrepreneurs, we want to think according to our context here we are living in, especially here in Africa and the rural community. So I wanted to ask them, is it also possible to gain the skills in mushroom growing from doctor?
Say, what was the last question? Is it possible to?
To learn the skills in, you said mushroom, Amada?
Oh. Yeah, absolutely. I agree that many solutions, and some of which I presented, are tech solutions, and they are they're not equally distributed. So I'm aware of that. Maybe something but biology doesn't just inform technological solutions. There are also more metaphorical solutions. How can we build communities? So if you go, maybe a few answers, go to Ask Nature, because there are many examples that are not necessarily technological, but it's about community building. It's about how can we collaborate? How can we bootstrap? How can we, I don't know, all these things. That's something you can look up, and you find examples from nature that are not technological at all, because they're also social innovations or something that can be learned from nature. Then if you want to know more about frugal innovation, also very simple innovation that's not tech and finance heavy, you can look up the Blue Economy from Gunter Pauli. I can type it here. It's called Blue Economy. Gunter Pauli was one, this is written with TH, I don't know exactly. Like this guy, he was one of the founders of the Ecover, this like sustainable detergent, and then he started the Blue Economy. These are solutions that are frugal, that are really low key, especially for self-help, basically, that you're not dependent on technology, not dependent on any developmental budgets, but rather because we know the best help is to do it yourself and like come up with the solutions that are locally adapted and that empower the people and don't create new dependencies. So that is something that I can encourage. Another thing you could check out asnature.org, right? And then there's another one. I think it's Paul Hawken. It's the Project Drawdown. That's also what you should check out. It does list, I don't know the entire list, but it's basically the top 100 solutions to lower carbon dioxide. And there's probably also solutions that are not necessarily technological, but that are like more frugal. So maybe these are a few entry points because I agree. I mean, the technology and access to technology is not equally distributed like everything else, unfortunately, on this planet. And therefore, we need to empower those who are not having this easy access to run innovations, especially there by themselves also.
Thank you very much. I think that I answered the question, Tambasa, but we will share all of these informations also like in an email after this workshop, because I think it's very, very useful. We have also a question from Azami. Thinking about how rapidly technological complexity is increasing, what scares me the most is probably the potential for misinformation and the behavioral response that will follow. How can we ensure equitable access to future-ready skills, particularly those related to data literacy and discerning AI-generated images and content? How, in your opinion, can we democratize these crucial skills to empower individuals and avoid this scenario?
Yeah, that's a very difficult one, and I agree. It's a huge challenge. It has many facets. I don't have all answers. It has many different entry points, I guess. First of all, we should generally teach, especially young people, how to treat this information, how to deal and handle social media and technology, that they develop. Like basically what we need very often is critical thinking skills to really question and challenge everything we hear. In a world where everything can be artificially generated, we need to question and back check whatever we got. Is that real or not? Can it be basically backed up or is it made up? So that's one thing. And this is about an awareness and about like upskilling regarding these competencies, critical thinking and digital literacy. The other thing is about a democratization of these skills. I mean, that's a whole different thing, because here we are talking about also access to information and education, equal access, and that's the cool thing. I mean, again, that's a risk and that's something we should think about, but at the same time, we should always have this look at it with the potential. Like, what is the potential, the upside also? And here, democratization is one of the aspects of digitalization, because that we have this conversation right now, that I talk to you, is a product and a result of digitalization. You couldn't listen to me most likely if we wouldn't have Zoom and if you couldn't access internet and Zoom. So having these decentralized and digital solutions help us actually to spread knowledge and experience. So this should be, and this is happening on an exponential pace as well. I mean, you all can write your opinion, share your opinion, and create networks and communities through social media and all kind of digital devices that was unimaginable 20, 30 years ago. And that's not long ago. I mean, that's happened within your lifetime for most. I don't know how old you all are, but for most of you, that was within your lifetime. That's a very, very short time. So every downside has upsides. So we should reinforce these upsides, use them wisely and responsibly, try to foresee and deal with the risks and disruptions. And at the same time, there will be downsides, and we can't avoid them all. I mean, we have seen, and we will see, and we currently also do see political distortion through manipulation in social networks. Well, hopefully, people learn from it, and there will be disruptions. There will be tragedies, but hopefully we will learn from that. Sometimes we think history teaches us otherwise, because our capacity to learn from history is sadly not so big often, but I'm still optimistic that we can learn. It requires also some kind of regulation from regulators, from governments, that they regulate, especially the big tech, because by now big tech grew to nation states, both in their like the capital they have, and even more so in the influence they have on people. So that is something that needs to be more regulated. But I also believe that in the future, this is a transition phase, and this is something where we need to learn, and we will learn with pain probably at some point. But I don't believe the future belongs belongs to the big companies. I think that will just be a transition period. We will learn that that's not a good thing, because we have so many monopolies, almost monopolies now in the tech world, especially. That's not a good thing, and it will lead to new basically movements that will change that, and we will relocalize. We see that already. We've seen the same thing with globalization. We all were following globalization for the last decades and thought this is the next thing. We all need to globalize. Now we see if we fly a yogurt 10,000 kilometers around the globe before we put it on a table, that this is insane. And we realize it's much better. Maybe I don't need this, I don't know, strawberry in winter, and better only buy it in summer when it grows here. So we relocalize. And I think the same thing will happen with technology at some point. We will find solutions, maybe along the hard way, that are better than the current ones. But we have probably through this learning curve. That's how I see it in a way, but still not losing hope and optimism for figuring it out somehow. And at the same time, working on the ways it should be.
Thank you. Sazami is answering. Thank you, Dr. Pechstein. So we're running out of time. We have the second session that is starting then like at 15:15. So we wanted to leave people with a little bit of time to have a break, but we see other questions coming. So maybe Peter, you want to ask your question, or shall I ask the one of Charles?
Yes, and I want to, now we have the new situation in Bangladesh that Professor Yunus is president of the country with this concept on the basis what the people expect from Professor Yunus is to bring it to much more to practice the concept of social business. What relation do you see between your ideas you mentioned today? I like it extremely. Could this be a special chance for Bangladesh, but not only for the whole world?
Well, yeah, like politically, I know too little sadly about this country that I can evaluate this, so I have to be careful. But it's nice to see that amongst all these psychopaths that we see in governments all around the world, that there is a person that has a whole different direction, that was supported by its people. So I see that maybe, hopefully, as one example for many to follow, where we see people that take responsibility, that hold and carry values that they not only preach, but that they live, and that could have a huge potential. But that needs a lot of changes of Trumps and the likes in order to get there. It's a great step, but it needs many more. And I hope that this will maybe be an example that will be a role model for many others. But maybe also, as I said before, it always starts with one. And we have Bhutan with the happiness index and so on. There are countries that run differently. And if they inspire, and again, here technology can help, because then we realize they have an advantage, or the people live more happily by these annual assessments they do and so on. So if prosperity is defined differently, and if we see actually, that's also still living in a bubble, but I would say that I witness a larger urge for connectedness, for meaning, for purpose in people. And that's also a development that is a trend. So that also tells me that people are slowly waking up and questioning what they're doing and want to get out of this consumerism, especially young people. They say, I don't need this kind of, don't need 2 cars in the house. What should I have this for? I'd rather live healthily and have good relationships to people I love and connect to nature and have meaning in my life than running in a hamster wheel, doing a job that I don't like just to pay the house that I haven't paid off yet. That's a crazy, insane concept. So I think this is slowly happening. And at the same time, I see a lot of extremes now happening, and we all see that. And I believe if we look at systems change, old systems always get super aggressive at the end of their period. They try to fight and hold back, like keep up with the new things until they can't any longer. The largest sailing boats were built when the motorboats started to exist, until they couldn't keep up. And then nowadays, no one except some sailors and hobbyists use sailing boats. So this is always when old systems die and new come into place. And that's what I hope and believe is also true for our capitalism as we know it, that this is the end phase of that and it becomes more aggressive, but eventually it cannot sustain. And the new thing, which is slowly here and there emerging and also enabled by technology, if we decided to use it that way, can help us to bring up the new paradigm. So that's what I'm convinced of and believing in.
That's great. While you were talking, I have a bit like this image of the line that you showed before, like connecting the dots.
Right,
that,
correct.
We were talking with Peter. We hope that this is going to go into other countries and other settings, but we will see. There's a super
maybe
last
one last thing to
Yeah.
share is to I don't tell much about it. Check out the constructor law from Adrien Béjean. He's a physicist, and he postulates the constructor law that any flow system, could be living systems and non-living systems, always optimize to the best possible flow. And since we know capitalism is not the best possible flow because it makes a few rich and lets most of the world not live in prosperity, it cannot sustain for a long run. So it's time. And if you look at spiral dynamics, so there's many concepts that argue why systemically what we live today cannot be a state that can be sustained for much longer. So systemically speaking, there will be changes. If we witness that in our generation, maybe not, but it will, and we can work on it. So we shouldn't lose that belief and this conviction.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. And have enjoyed the other talks and the program connected to it. And let's collectively make the world better. It's fun to do that.
Thank you, Arndt. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will send you maybe another question from Charles. That was another interesting question on what we can learn from nature with regard to resilience and related skills to adapt to climate change and its impacts. I think that's also another
right. But check Ask Nature and check like Paul Hawken. I think this answers quite a bit already.
Super. Good.
All right. Then thank you for listening. Thank you for asking, and good luck with everything. Greetings from Potsdam.
It was great to have you with us, Dr. Pechstein. Thank you so much. And for everybody else, let's take a little break for 5 minutes and then come back. We start the next session. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Pechstein.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye.